hour, but it gives us some idea. And there were 6,489 live radio occurrences since January. And total TV time, we had about 20 hours, and that started later. So, but that was with 87 videos and about 5,000 total views. We had 813 photos that people tagged in Flickr for ds106, videos, 160 YouTube videos, also some Vimeo videos as well. As of that date, we had 117 submitted assignments. That was the assignment thing we showed you. And completed assignments, people who actually took that assignment and did it, we had about 250 of those. We also actually had a rating system where people could come in and rate the assignments. So those were the top rated community assignments. We used Delicious. People bookmarked a variety of resources, so we also had some of those. We started to, countries represented by participants: US, Canada, Portugal, Australia, UK, Indonesia, Japan, Spain, New Zealand. And then the top 10 countries represented by site visitors. You can see those as well, because we did do Google Analytics on the course site. Number of syndicated blogs on the course site was 177 at the end of the semester, but there were 366 registered users. These were the most prolific ds106 bloggers. We wanted to reward them. We never got this stat, the number of videos blocked for copyright violation on YouTube. And then these are just the overall Google Analytics stats. So that gives you some idea of kind of the breadth of participation and what was generated out of the course that we were able to kind of gather at the end in a very unscientific way at the end of the semester. So we have about 10 minutes left. Do you want to answer any questions? We could talk about this for like an hour and, well, all day, but that wouldn't be very useful, so.
One point that was interesting that you brought up, and I'll actually just talk about it, is Aaron Clemmer, who just graduated. He was a computer science major. He was a great student. He knew what he was doing with computer programming. And so there was a community out there that was basically, Alan Levine in particular, was basically like, hey, Aaron, you think you can make a Twitter bot that shows every occurrence of ds106 radio as a Twitter bot? And Aaron's like, I think I can. 3 hours later, he creates a Twitter bot for the class that's showing us every song or every occurrence that happens. Then he uses that Twitter bot to analyze the data to give us this whole long idea. And I'm thinking about, this is a computer science student working in the wild with people he doesn't know to create these awesome things. And you know, for him, it was remarkable because he hadn't thought about doing any of this, but the occurrence that arose that no one planned gave this student some real life experience. And also, Alan Levine is a very good programmer, although he doesn't talk about it. He was talking to Aaron about things I couldn't and giving him advice. And kind of us letting go and letting people who were good at what they do rise and help out the students changed everything for us.
I actually joke that Alan Levine actually taught the class more than me in some ways, but he stepped up and he did that because he was so invigorated. And one other thing I wanted to mention is there's been some conversations about Twitter and its usefulness or lack thereof. And I have to say there was a moment like in this middle of the semester where I was like, how did this happen? Like, how did we get here that we have all these people following along and they care so deeply about ds106? And I realized that if you trace it back, what it really comes down to, and it's not so much my Twitter network because I'm not as active on Twitter as Jim is, but it really was Jim putting a call out on Twitter. And that was what generated this kind of like wave of interest and participation. So as much as, yes, people do tweet about like what they're having for breakfast, I actually kind of like that because it makes me feel like I know something about somebody. But there's also something else that's going on here when you invest in a tool like that for long enough and you build that network and you participate and you contribute, it gives back to you in amazing ways. And what it gave back this semester was immeasurable. It could not have happened. Like this could not have happened if that network didn't exist.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Janet, do you want the... Okay.
Did you have any concern about the house?
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, because people care what you say, Janet.
I'm not just putting it here. Anyway, was there any concern about the outside world drowning out the participants in the class or any evidence of that?
Well, you know, I'll let Martha speak to this too. At the beginning, you couldn't tell who was a student at Mary Washington and who was part of the open class. And that I kind of liked because the two melded together. And the students ultimately for UMW, because the open students did what they wanted, then left, and that was the idea of it. Like Noam was saying, they're not getting a grade. I'm not evaluating their work. They do what they want, then they go, and there was no hardship there. So the UMW students finally took over the stream towards the end of the semester. But in the beginning, there was this great kind of mashup of, I don't know if this student's part of Martha's class, is from Indonesia, or is part of and so it kind of gave this idea of a community that came out of nowhere in some ways, and like immediately you had these people commenting. Alan Levine was commenting on students' work, students were commenting on Alan Levine's work. I mean, they were kind of pushed out of the idea of this is your class.
And I think the other thing that because we were both teaching, and Jim was teaching one section online, there was already this aspect of the class that involved people outside of the room. Do you know what I mean? So I don't think my students even really noticed. I mean, they just expected. It was kind of funny. They were just like, well, I guess this is a class where lots of people comment, you know? And they didn't really pay a lot of attention to, like, is this a Mary Washington student or somebody in Indonesia?
It was amazing. If you look at the stats, I mean, there was a student in the face-to-face class who came in and she was like, I just wrote a post and it was kind of about nothing, and 13 people commented on it. I mean, if you're a teacher and you've worked with blogs and you get 13 comments on a throwaway post, you know your student's changing everything. They're like, okay, people are reading. I got to change the whole way I approach this.
I have an audience.
And yeah, the audience, and Martha has theorized so much of this about the habit of daily creation, about the idea of audience. I mean, if you read her blog as she's getting ready for ds106, it's all right there, the theoretics. And the idea that we built in an audience and they were part of that audience as well as participants in the creation, I really think changed the dynamic in ways. This was the single greatest professional experience I've ever had in terms of just watching what I've been talking about about teaching to faculty come to life for me in that way. It was just amazing.
So how do you do it again? What do you got for us next time?
No, I actually have an answer for that, even though you're being snarky.
I am.
But I mean,
I knew one of you would.
I know. Well, I start teaching it again on Monday for the first 5 weeks, and then Jim teaches it second session in an online format. And honestly, what I kind of learned, especially as a first-time instructor, was that I don't know. Especially with a class like this, that it's as much as being open to that as it is about going into it saying, I hope something great happens. We could never have anticipated what came out of this. And will the same level of amazingness happen? That's not the point, really, because I've learned that lesson, and I understand, too, sort of what that magic was, like what it helped me understand so much better about what I was doing as the instructor of the class, that I know I will bring to bear if I teach it again, no matter what. And if something magical happens in the Minecraft server, cool.
That's right. Minecraft is the next thing.
Yeah, Minecraft is the next thing.
We have a whole world of Minecraft, and Lee, who's taking the class this summer online, has already been building me a house in Minecraft. I mean, she's going to get credit for that. I mean, but the idea here is that we don't know, but we want platforms to experiment with. And the other thing is, one of the ideas I was thinking about, this is my first time teaching an online course, and I'd never done it before. I talked a lot about it. But doing it, I found that online students talk about independence. They did their stuff. They came to me and said, hey, it's done. If they came to my office, they had a question. I was amazed at how independent they were and how much they went to Google. All those things we said you should do, they did. And so this summer, I had played around with the idea of teaching the entire class in character. I don't know, have any of you seen David Cronenberg's Videodrome? Videodrome is an interesting movie. It's all about flesh and technology and the two becoming part. It's kind of like Marshall McLuhan. His theories come life. Well, there's a character in that film called Dr. Oblivion. And Dr. Oblivion's whole idea is that he only ever shows up on screen. You can never see him in the real life. So he'll go to a talk show host and they'll put a TV down and they view him, the film takes him on that. So I love the whole idea of using ds106 TV as Dr. Oblivion. I only show up on screen. I'm only this kind of disembodied figure. But through the work that Timmy Boy has done, or Tim Owens has done, we can now pull all the students into a TV show via Skype and have them be part of a process that's, I mean, I don't know if I'm going to do it completely in character. That's kind of a lot of work. And Tom was like, are you sure? Tom Wood was like, are you sure you want to do that totally in character? Isn't this like your second online course ever? But, I mean, I think the idea is that, you know, Jeff is right. What is next? And you know what? What's next is what we imagine. That's what teaching should be.
And, you know, another thing that I was just thinking of that was an important component, and this was something that I totally didn't really expect or understand when it was happening, and I actually thought about doing a lightning slide this year that was going to be like the 15 things I learned teaching for the first time, but I didn't get to it. But one of them was going to be how hard it is to eat your own dog food. Because one of the things that Jim and I do try to do, and I have to admit, I did a pretty good job the first half of the semester, and then I got into Planning Faculty Academy, and it was harder, was to do the same assignments as our students. And at a certain point, I started to feel really guilty because I wasn't keeping up. And then I kind of had to let that go because I realized that that was just how this semester was going to be. But then I was like, how many other professors think that they have to do their students' assignments? I was like, that's weird. Why do I think I have to do that? But at the same time, it was so good to do it when I was doing it. Like, that made me understand what was happening in the class in ways that I completely didn't anticipate.
Yeah.
Would this be able to work with field trips? Like when we go out on a field trip and there are some students who can't go because they have to work that day and they can't be with us. So could they then view that and see what we've done on the field trip?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things with ds106 radio that blew my mind, I'd never had a cell phone. I was kind of like, whatever, I don't need one. I work 5 minutes away, you know. But when I saw what ds106 radio allowed with mobile devices, like, so say you go out on a field trip and you have half the class who can't come. The students could actually use their mobile devices, and it's pretty much an iPhone, an iPod, Android may work, an iPad, it doesn't matter. With a $2 app, they could actually broadcast what they're doing from the field. And you could have that not only broadcasted back to the students, if they had a video camera or an iPhone with video, they could actually record what was happening and put it back on an archive somewhere that anyone else could share. And in terms of field study and stuff like that, that's a pretty remarkable thing that we're not even harnessing yet.
So it really doesn't need to be current time.
No.
Like we could record it, say when we go to Costa Rica or places, and then bring it back.
We have it set up right now. Like, here's a cool example of the ds106 radio had blown my mind. Here's a cool example. Anyone know of Mike Watt? Mike Watt was in the Minutemen in the 80s, and then he actually went on to create his own band, Firehose. He's kind of a punk rock superstar, but he's a really mellow guy. So there's this guy, Noise Professor, who's out in Northern California, who's big into music, and he did this thing. He's like, man, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take my iPhone, I'm going to record the Mike Watt show live. And then he took it from the Mike Watt show and put it back on ds106 radio so anyone could listen to Mike Watt on the radio. And then I went in there and recorded the stream, and we now have an archive of a live version of a Mike Watt show. You think what Deadheads would do if they had this kind of technology? What we have here is completely open ground, and I don't care, digital storytelling is an example of this. But this might be where Mary Washington faculty start thinking about these tools, man, they're ubiquitous now. Students have smartphones. Maybe not all of them, but enough. And how do we start experimenting with this in little ways? Not, you know, it doesn't have to be you have to go this route. You probably burn out like we did to some degree. But, I mean, how do we start using the media, like audio and video, to make those tools not a hindrance, as someone said earlier in the class, but a valuable tool for the teaching and learning, and to realize that that tool they brought is going to bring something to the whole experience of teaching and learning and their education, right? I thought one of the most illuminating things was a lot of students were afraid of the radio. They were really afraid. I mean, a community grew up around ds106 radio that was not part of the students. They used it, they did some fun stuff with it, but that community was completely separate. And so it was interesting to me to think about why is that, and what do we need to do to kind of think through that. And Andy Rush has been talking about this again and again. You know, how can we use these tools like video and audio to start thinking about sharing the stuff we do at Mary Washington, right? I mean, how crazy would it be for faculty to sit down with a student and talk about a cool thing they did on video? And like not grade them, but say, you did this awesome thing. Let's put this in and then put it on TV councils or on video live streams all over the web. Why are we doing this? It's easy.
We've used up as much time as we can. And we have a big presentation now. Amanda's going to be delivering her plenary address. But I want to thank everybody for their attention, and if you have any other questions about this, we'd be happy to answer them. So thank you.